Hey everyone, I hope you're well. My name's Dr. Alex George and this is my 2 years alcohol-free from grief to growth video. I am, as of this week, 2 years sober, which is a huge milestone for me. Crazy, I'm actually shaking a bit, it's mad. It is a wet, windy, cold autumnal day, so grab yourself a nice cup of tea, get yourself nice and warm and cozy as you join me on my journey through sobriety. The last 2 years have been the most revealing of my life. I've learned so much about myself. There's been incredible highs and lows.
It's been a difficult few weeks actually, to be fair. I'm actually doing quite well the last few days, but getting used to being given a diagnosis of ADHD hasn't been easy.
And in this video, I'm going to share with you exactly what it's been like, raw and unfiltered. So stick around as we learn what it's like to be 2 years alcohol-free. Okay, first of all, let's start with the obvious topic of how did I get myself into such a mess? Because many of you might question how a doctor has ended up in a situation where they're using alcohol to kind of as a crutch and in life to kind of get through challenges. How do you get yourself into such difficulty? And I think it's a good question, so let's answer it. Well, first of all, I think we often have this idea that doctors are always really healthy and they're happy and they're making all the best choices because they're people that have learned about the body and health and that they're treating other people. We know that often this isn't the case. In fact, things like struggles with alcohol is actually quite common amongst medics. There's certainly a decent percentage of people that really struggle with that. And that's partly because of things like stress, pressure, overworking, and the fact that we're human too. So for many of the reasons that other people might turn to alcohol as a crutch, us doctors, we are human beings, we end up in similar situations. For me personally, it's something that kind of crept up on me. And I didn't really realize how much of a problem it was until I'd stopped drinking for about 6 months. Honestly, and we're going to come on to that. So basically, if you look over the last kind of 6 years, my life has changed so much. In 2018, I went on that show, Love Island, which many of you might know me first from. I came out and the world was crazy. I found it an incredibly shocking experience. And I used probably alcohol at that time to be able to go to events and stuff to reduce anxiety. Bear in mind, whenever I left the house, people were kind of like, oh, that's Alex, talking to me, interacting with me, asking for photos. It's not a kind of a normal experience. So I often used alcohol just to kind of try and calm myself down. Not every day or in a daily sense, but if I was going on a Saturday to an event, I would use alcohol to numb. And that's probably not so dissimilar to what people do anyway. I mean, if you're watching this now, have you ever used alcohol, perhaps when you're going to a busy event or to a date or something and you want to feel a bit calmer? It's quite common, right? That happened. Then you went through a period of time, fast forward a few years, I went back to A&E, we had the pandemic. And after the pandemic, I kind of came out of that situation hoping to get back to some normality as most people did. And all of a sudden, boom, something happened in my personal life which threw me into despair. In fact, there's a video that I made a couple of years ago explaining what had happened and also kind of describing the state that I was in at that time. And I think, to be honest, even at that point, I don't think I realized how much I was struggling. So 4 years ago, my brother died by suicide at 19 years old. And obviously, that is an incredibly difficult thing to deal with. And unfortunately, because of the ways that I'd learned and been taught or been socialized, I guess, growing up, the ways I coped with stress were drinking alcohol and working really hard. So when my brother passed away, after the initial shock passed, I basically worked so hard on my government campaigns. I was campaigning, writing books, doing podcasts, creating content to suppress how I felt. But you couldn't work all the time, could you? You can't work 24/7. So for the other times, I often turned to alcohol, especially like on Friday or Saturday. It filled a chasm in my life, and also drinking alcohol suppressed a lot of those emotions. The problem is these things then creep up on you. Fast forward a couple of years and it was a recipe for disaster: overworking, not taking care of myself and drinking too much alcohol. So on the 4th of December 2022, I had a moment that basically changed everything. I walked into my hairdresser's where I live. I literally sat down ready for my haircut, and I looked in the mirror, and when I looked into my eyes, I realized that I was completely lost. Not only was I physically completely different, I was 21 stone overweight, I was puffy, I was swollen, my eyes were red, my hair was unhealthy, my skin was unhealthy, but inside my soul, I was completely lost. And I had a realization that I can't continue like this. I'm literally going to be dead by 40 if I carry on like this. You know, in that state, the amount of stress and pressure I was under, the amount I was working, how little I was looking after myself, and the alcohol was a recipe for disaster. But it wasn't just in terms of the physical health. Mentally, I was so depressed. I was deeply depressed and really, really numb. Ice cold numbness. It was awful. So what I decided to do that day is that I couldn't continue and I had to have a change. And I decided to do two things. First of all was putting the bottle down. So I decided on that day I was going to stop drinking. And I hadn't at that point decided how long that would be for. I actually only thought it would be for a few months. Obviously now we're like 2 years in, which is crazy, which is absolutely crazy. I'm going to talk about why I continued in this video, but also in a series of other videos too. And the second thing that I did was I decided every morning I go for a walk outside. And it's actually from that very decision that the Stompcast kind of grew and became a bigger thing. Like I'd already had this idea that I wanted to create the Stompcast podcast, walking with a guest, learning about health. And from doing and having those conversations, I realized I need to be walking every morning and I need to be outside in nature. I need to be nurturing myself. And I think it planted a seed that had a domino effect on the rest of my life. Because often we think that when you see someone that's perhaps, achieve something like run a marathon or something, you think, oh, that person's always been that way, or they were born that way, or they were just given that gift, or this is just how they are. But for most people, you start with the first step. That might be going outside, putting your trainers on, just going for a 1K run, building to 5K, building to 10K, half marathon, marathon distance. It always starts with the first step. And for me, those first steps were bottle down, go for a walk. So at that point, I knew things had to change. What I didn't know would be what would happen next. And I'm now going to share with you some of the things that really surprised me in the early days of sobriety, because things happened that I didn't expect. Now, when I stopped drinking, I thought, okay, when I stop drinking, I'm going to need to still probably socialize a bit. I need to probably get used to going to places and dealing with people going, are you drinking or why are you not drinking? I kind of expected those things, but there were changes that were highly unexpected. And let's start with one of those. My sleep. Now, you're probably expecting me to say, oh my God, you had heavenly sleep, you stopped drinking and straight away it was brilliant. It wasn't. My sleep got worse. It got worse for about 8 weeks before it got better. And I found this really fascinating. And when I dug into the science behind it, it's because, yes, alcohol leaves your blood system very quickly, it leaves your body quickly, but the effects it has on your body take many, many months to change and to reverse. Some things are very quick, some things take a lot longer. And one of the things that really does take time is the effect on your brain. So if you have listened to the podcast episode with Nicole Vignola on the Stompcast, she's a neuroscientist, she explains brilliantly how alcohol affects the brain. So alcohol causes cellular death in the brain. It kills, our brain matter effectively. We have lots and lots of brain matter, but if we drink over a long period of time, it causes degeneration of the brain. It causes all sorts of different symptoms and issues within the brain. When you stop drinking, it isn't just a matter of that the alcohol's gone, everything's fine. It takes time for your brain to adapt to a non-alcohol state. Essentially, we can't regrow those neurons in the parts of your brain that have died from the alcohol, but we create new synapses, we create new pathways. That takes time. And through that adjustment period, things like sleep can often get worse, and it really did for me. So I found that from week 1, so about a week after stopping, all the way to week 8, that I couldn't get to sleep very easily. When I was asleep, I was having vivid, crazy dreams. And when I woke up, I was always feeling tired. And I found this crazy. I thought that one of the biggest benefits of stopping drinking was that I was going to be like, the best sleep ever. Not the case. The good news is though, when you get past those 8 or 9 weeks, you do get to your sober sleep. And all of a sudden, falling asleep's easier. You enter deeper sleep and you wake up rejuvenated. It is an absolute game changer. Another big thing that I noticed, and something I think I really got right when I stopped drinking alcohol, was the timing. I decided to stop drinking in December. Now, it's important for me to say that although I definitely struggle with alcohol, and alcohol has had a huge impact on my life, I wasn't addicted to alcohol. Now, I have ADHD. I was diagnosed with that just before I stopped drinking. It was part of the reason I decided to stop, because alcohol, petrol onto ADHD, boom, not a good idea. Although I'm not addicted, I'm clearly more impulsive because of ADHD. It is one of the things that we can notice with it. So alcohol is clearly causing big problems in my life. And one of the things I wanted to do was to stop at a time that I could really see, yes, I can do this. And so people often said, like, you chose December, that's a really hard time of year to do it. Yes, but it means that if I knew that if I could get through December, I could get through any time of year. So what I did is that on the 4th of December, I stopped drinking, and I was like, right, no more drink, and I'll walk each day. And I literally got then to the next weekend and was like, okay, what am I going to do? I was like, well, I could just not go to the pubs or not go anywhere where people are or not go along to events. There's lots of Christmas events and things happening at the time. Or I could just go for literally an hour, maybe an hour and a half, have a couple of alcohol-free drinks and leave and see what happens. And that's what I did. And I'm so glad that I did that, because in December of 2022, I socialised more than I've ever socialised in any Christmas run-up. Not because I necessarily wanted to or needed to socialise that much, but because I kind of wanted to prove a point. I found this really interesting thing that two things happened when I went along to events and didn't drink. First of all, I realised that no one cares. People might ask you at first, oh, do you want a drink? Oh no, I'm not drinking, I'm having a break from alcohol, or I've decided to stop for a while. As soon as you've answered a couple of those questions, no one cares. That's the first thing. Second, even if they did care a little bit, they forget because they're probably drinking. They don't care, they're in their own bubble. Remember, we all have the spotlight thing on us, right? We're walking into rooms thinking that we've got the spotlight. We don't. Everyone else is worrying about their own stuff. So they get on with their night. But the second thing that happens is that you really actually ask yourself the question, do I actually enjoy this? Am I enjoying this in this pub? You know, after people have been drinking for a couple of hours, this is true of everyone, not judging anyone else, this is true of myself when I was drinking, you start repeating the same stories, you start becoming really loud, probably generally become quite annoying, and you realise actually, I'm really glad I came to see this, to actually really experience this with everything stripped back, with nothing messing with my chemicals, to ask myself the question, do I actually want to spend a lot of my time here? And what has changed, if you go forward now 2 years, is that I still enjoy going to the pub with friends, but I do it differently. I tend to go earlier in the evening, before everyone's really drunk. I leave earlier, and I do less pub time in my life versus other things. We're going to come on to that in a little bit, but it was a really important learning curve. So if you're in those early days of sobriety at the moment, immerse yourself. This is different if you're struggling with addiction. So again, I'm talking from the perspective here of my own perspective. Addiction may well be different. You may well want to completely avoid going to the pubs. Absolutely fine. But if you feel, okay, I can go and not drink, it's actually a really useful thing. Even if you go and don't enjoy yourself, that's data. And it's showing your brain, see, this stuff that you used to go to and you drink to enjoy, you don't actually really enjoy. Or you go and have a great time and realise, didn't need the drink anyway. Number 3, and I think this was probably the hardest thing in the early days of sobriety, was filling the void. See, what alcohol does, especially in modern society, is it kind of fills the cracks in your life where there's void or there's boredom, there's loneliness, there's grief or there's challenges. For me, what alcohol was doing was suppressing grief and filling loneliness. See, I'd become very lonely because I'd worked so hard and I'd put so much of my effort into my career and my campaigns. I actually had neglected my own personal life. I literally wasn't taking care of myself, but I wasn't nurturing, friendships and spending time with people. I was lonely. I was deeply lonely. And what alcohol was doing was filling that gap. And I think, if we're honest, many people do the same. So when you remove alcohol and you take that out, that leaves a void that you need to fill with something else. That was a shock. I found that hard. And a lot of people go, oh, I stopped drinking, it's amazing, it's fantastic. Not all of it's fantastic. See, when I took the alcohol out in those first few months, there was a void, grief suddenly came up into that void, loneliness came into that void, boredom came into that void, and it was actually quite hard. But the truth is, and that's what's really important, I'm going to be making lots of videos around alcohol-free living, I'm going to be digging into certain topics. This is a real overview of those 2 years and the key things or the top line things that I learned, is that this grief that's coming up, or this loneliness or this boredom, is a message. It is a signal that you need to deal with something. Avoidance is not helpful. In life, we must avoid the avoidance. You know, we must avoid when we're trying to like turn away from something, we need to turn back towards it and go head on to deal with that thing. And even though that was really difficult dealing with those things that I've described, it was really, really important. But what you should do, and it's not, this is not an avoidant thing, but what you should do to bring some positivity into your life is to make sure that you do fill your time with new and nurturing things that you enjoy. So when people stop drinking in October or in January, one of the challenges and the reason I think people find it very boring and they want to go back to drinking is because they go, and this is a general rule of thumb, it's not everyone, but they go, right, January's coming, I'm going to save money, I'm not going to go out and about, I'm going to stay indoors, I'm not going to drink alcohol, cozy it, I'm going to go to the gym every day. And what happens is that they remove their social connections, they don't do anything fun, they're kind of restricting their lives, and surprise, surprise, they're finding that unenjoyable. You should try and enrich, not restrict your life. So I did the opposite. That's why I went to loads of these events. I started going to join exercise classes, I joined Barry's, I thought I'm going to pick up the guitar and start learning guitar again. I got a piano, I was going to learn the piano, haven't successfully done that, but I was going to try and do it. And the point being is find things to fill the void with positivity and enrichment. I'm going to be doing lots of content specifically on that early sobriety journey because it is fundamental, and the work that you do at that time gives you the foundation for growth that comes later. But it's beyond the scope of this video and we've got lots more to talk about. Okay, let's move on and talk about the mental, physical, emotional and financial changes that have happened now that I'm 2 years alcohol free. I still can't believe it. 2 years alcohol free. It's crazy. If you follow my Instagram, you'll see that I had white paper that I wrote down, I think like 10 days, 30 days sober, several months, 6 months, 100 days. I'm butchering this, but the point is I was kind of tracking that, and it's crazy that I'm here at 2 years. It's such a long time, but now it just feels a part of my life, and there's no part of me really that regrets that decision. It's a bit of a spoiler alert, I should save that to the end, but there's no part of it, and the part of me that regrets it is just so much part of my life. I don't even think anymore about drinking alcohol. Anyway, when I come on to that, let's focus on this topic that we're going to talk about, which is the changes I've noticed in these areas. Let's start with the elephant in the room. I'm a little smaller than I used to be, I think that's fair to say. When I stopped drinking on the 4th of December, I was around 21 stone in weight. For context, I'm 6'3" in height. So I was, really overweight. As you'll know from a lot of things I talk about on my social media, I'm not particularly interested in weight, to be honest. And the only reason that I know that I have lost that much weight is not because I was weighing myself, but at the start I weighed myself for my ADHD medication, and I've known along the way where my weights ended up. But I was really focused actually on not becoming obsessive over weight. That's been a really important thing to me. But that being said, there's no point hiding away from the fact that I was morbidly obese. I was extremely obese. I was putting myself at risk of strokes and heart attacks and diabetes. So clearly losing the weight was important. We're not talking about, a couple of pounds here or an aesthetic view of weight. I was objectively a weight that was extremely unhealthy, and we shouldn't hide away from that. So yes, a lot has changed in that front. I'm about 7 stone lighter. Why has that happened? Well, there's a few reasons. We're going to talk about this specifically in another video, but as a top line, effectively removing the alcohol unlocked or turned the key of the door for me to open to a whole new world of living. And that new world was having the energy to go outside and walk, having so much energy to go and exercise, having the mental capacity and the discipline to be able to stick to things that I committed to, like going to the gym, like eating relatively well, like caring for myself. See, what alcohol does to you and your brain is it basically removes most of your capacity for discipline. It removes the vast amount of your motivation. It takes away your ability to say no to unhealthy decisions like takeaways and so on. And it makes you not really care much about the long term. it makes you very short-sighted and focused on the next social event or the next drink that you're having or the next opportunity, to go out and have a few beers. And when you remove that away, all of a sudden, your energy doubles. You get up in the morning, you're not like, oh God, like I used to be, if I drunk on a Friday, Saturday night, I'd feel a shell of myself until Monday, Tuesday, and I wouldn't be back to full energy till Wednesday, and then Friday I was having a drink. I'm sure that's a story that a lot of people will share. So imagine removing that fatigue, boosting the energy lows, and all of a sudden you can commit to things. And the big thing I committed to was exercise. I walked every day. I started running because I had a few guests on the Stompcast that really inspired me. I got into the gym and started lifting weights. I've always enjoyed weights. And all of a sudden I opened up this new life. I went to things like Friday Night Lights, where I met people that enjoyed running. I made friends at Barry's gym class. There's people down at my local gym that I made friends with. All of a sudden, it opened up a new world. This thing that I always struggled with. I always used to struggle with exercise. I'd do the classic loop where I'd get motivated to exercise. I'd do a couple of months of being good at it. Then I'd go through a period where I'd have a holiday, have too much to drink, or Christmas would happen. Motivation drops and I'd fall out of the gym. All of a sudden, for the first time in my life, I was able to commit to something and stick at it. So this is what's happened. 2 years later, I've lost about 7 stone, and that change has been huge. Okay, on a mental health perspective, you might have noticed at the start of the video, I said that there's been a lot of improvements, that there's a huge shift from grief to growth. But let's be honest, it doesn't mean that I always feel good. In fact, over the last few months, I've had some of the most difficult times of my life mentally, real ups and downs. The truth is, when you remove the alcohol, you remove that avoidance, you remove that pushing down, and you have to deal with your stuff. You've got to deal with the stuff. But in the same way that when you take a loan from the bank and you don't pay the loan back, the interest means that the amount the debt grows. When you don't deal with the problems that you have or the things that you need to face, that debt grows too. So removing the alcohol means like, come on, let's deal with this. And that is what happens. I dealt with a lot of stuff I'd buried. I'm dealing with a lot of stuff that kind of pops up and that I need to deal with. And on the whole, I'm much happier. I think the beauty is that when you stop drinking, your capacity for life increases. Your capacity for your traumas increase, but really importantly, your capacity for joy. From my perspective, my personal experience, I feel a calmer, happier, more level-headed, less frantic version of myself. I used to be big highs, massive lows, big highs, massive lows. We've narrowed that more into a more manageable range. Bear in mind the fact that I have ADHD as well, and what I said before is that petrol, ADHD, big fire, not good. That has really helped as well. I'm going to talk separately about alcohol and ADHD in another video. I'm saying this a lot in another video because like you could do a whole 40-minute video on alcohol and ADHD, and I will, don't you worry, but not right now. The big thing I've noticed is that I can control the controllables much better. There's less emotional lability, ups and downs. I feel more centered, more motivated, more productive, and just quite a bit happier. I don't, however, feel perfect, and I still have times that I struggle. And alcohol does do this clever thing where it does numb. And what I've found that when you stop drinking, you have to find other things. There's no quick hit like you get with alcohol. So when you socialize, you need to make the effort to socialize. You need to do things that are less easy than just going to the pub. You need to use things like exercise to boost your mood, whereas alcohol would previously give you a bit of a hit of some sort. But it's something that I've learned to deal with, and in time you adapt to. And to be honest, it's actually really rewarding to earn your good feelings. Let's briefly touch on financial health. Alcohol is really expensive, and I realised I was spending so much money, hundreds and hundreds of pounds a month on alcohol, because it's not just the booze you're buying in the pub, it's the taxi home, the takeaways the next day, the lost productivity. If you're someone who is an entrepreneur, like myself, who has a business where your output is related to your ability to generate income, then clearly being half of yourself, a shell of yourself, is not going to be very helpful about being productive with your time. So I found that stopping drinking has had profound effects on my finances. And it's not just about spending the alcohol or the ability to be productive, it's also your choices you make with your finances. You can suddenly start looking in the long distance and thinking, well, Do I have the right savings account? Am I putting some of my money into investments? Am I saving up to that holiday I want to do? What do I actually want to spend my money on? It's a fascinating one, finances, and we're going to be talking about that more on this channel very soon. From an emotional perspective, which kind of, in a way, I guess, is similar to the mental health answer, I feel that I am able to live and experience the full range of my emotions, where before I was so numb and anxious most of the time, numb, anxious all the time, that I didn't really experience other things like joy or peace. Whereas even though I still struggle quite a lot and I definitely have ups and downs in my mental health, I am much more able to experience the full range of human emotions. And I think for me, my goal isn't to be happy all the time, because I think that's impossible, but what I don't want to feel is stuck. And when I was drinking, I felt extremely stuck a lot of the time. Let's reflect now for a moment on 2 years of alcohol-free living and what that means in the context of my life. And I guess if you look at it this way, I probably had my first drinks of alcohol in my teenage years, drank through med school, drunk plenty since then in my 20s, and clearly struggled in the few years before I stopped drinking. That going alcohol-free is a seismic change in your life. And I think there's an awareness that in the drinking months and years, time blurs, your awareness of what happened when, what is going on in your life is less clear. I think there is an absolute clarity that comes when you stop drinking. And some of that's actually kind of hard, because there's a lot of clarity of looking back at your life and thinking like, oh gosh, I wouldn't have done that now, or I'd do this differently. But I think that clarity is a beautiful thing, because I'm much better now at remembering, what's happened when, what's going on in my life. I remember events better. If I go to a family occasion, I remember the conversations I had, the food that I ate, how the food tasted, the emotions I felt at that time. Whereas it's so strange, when you drink alcohol, it kind of rounds everything off. You go to a wedding or a funeral, or you celebrate graduation, or you've had a bad day at work, it just kind of rounds everything. Nothing seems to have its own distinct lines and distinct feeling to it. So for me, over the last 2 years, I think if I was to kind of summarize what has changed, it's everything. I have opened up an entirely new world. I have seen and had a taste of what I think life kind of should be like. We weren't born with a bottle of alcohol in our hands. We are, as humans, not meant to have alcohol in our system. I feel that I'm able to experience life as it should be experienced, if that makes any sense. Do I think that at 2 years I've learned everything about alcohol-free living? Absolutely not. Probably the biggest shock for me has been that no matter how long I go, as in every month that goes by, I learn something new. Someone said something the other day though that makes a lot of sense. They said, you've been drinking for, say, 15 years, right? Why do you think in a year you're going to learn or unlearn all the things of 15 years of drinking and suddenly have, mastered this new way of living in 1 year or 2 years? It's not going to happen. You kind of need to spend at least the number of years you've been drinking afterwards to have that level of experience. I don't know if that makes sense. I'd be really interested to hear in the comments what you think about that. But fundamentally, the longer time goes on, the more that I'm learning. And all I can say to you is that I'm incredibly grateful. I feel genuinely lucky and I'm grateful. If I go back, I give Alex a hug for many reasons back then when he sat down in that chair, and say, thank you for making this choice, because future me here today is so glad that Alex on the 4th of December of 2022 made the decision he did. And if you're sat here now watching this video and you've heard all the stuff I'm saying, you're thinking, shall I, shan't I? Commit to it. I tell you something now, I am willing to bet with you that in 6 months' time, a year's time, that future you will be desperate to go back and give you a hug for making the choice of dropping the alcohol. And I would say to you, what is the worst that can happen? Will you regret 6 months of alcohol-free living? Let me tell you this. I have never heard of someone, no one has ever said to me, I really regret going sober for 6 months. Whereas I've heard almost on a daily basis people saying, I regret drinking the night before. And I actually bumped into someone in my local gym the other day who is a few months alcohol-free. They'd seen some of my journey and they kind of took that step. And they said, like, I'm so glad already, I'm so glad this is a new life. And I think that's what's exciting. If you start this journey, you're going to start a new adventure. You've done the old thing loads. And I think that's what I realized, well, I'd done going to the pub and drinking, like, you're just repeating the same experience. This is a new adventure. It's exciting. And on that note, as we come to the end of this video, what I'll say to you is, I'd love to be here to help you. You know, we're going into December now and January. If you're tempted, make today the first day. Stop drinking today and join me on this journey. I'm going to make videos that are going to support you through this time to make sure that you get the most out of alcohol-free living. Now, this channel isn't an alcohol-free channel. We're talking about mental fitness more broadly, but of course we're going to do lots of content around this. And if you're someone that goes, well, actually, actually my relationship with alcohol is good, I don't want to stop, that's great. But you may well want to maximize your alcohol-free living time or your mental health when you're not drinking, or activities you can do when you don't drink. And so this channel is going to be for you too. Right guys, we'll come to the end of the video. All I'll say is thank you so much for everyone that's supported me. I've had incredible support from you guys on the YouTube channel. I know that I haven't been posting for a long time, but you guys supported me very well at the early days. I've had great support on my Instagram as well. I hope that you've liked and subscribed to the video. It does help it very much, and we will see you on the next one. You're going to have a new video every Sunday, so please do stick around. I look forward to seeing you again. I'm going to need another cup of tea because I've been talking loads. Take care, everyone. Look after yourselves, and goodbye.